one thing to note and to kind of pay attention to is the fact that the Torah and the Evangel, the Injil that are mentioned in the Quran, don't corroborate 100% with the Old Testament and the New Testament that we have. There's a tendency, you might be tempted to say, oh, wherever the Quran says Torah, that equals the Old Testament, or it equals the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Or it might say that the Injil, wherever the Quran says Injil, let's just translate it as New Testament or the Bible. That's not the case. The Torah that's revealed, that's mentioned in the Quran, it always refers to the actual tablets that were sent down to Moses. Right? If you're familiar with the story of Musa in Surah Taha or Surah Al-Qasas, right? He goes up to the mountain, right? The Mount of Sinai or Tur, right? Tur Sinai, it's mentioned in the Quran. He goes there. He spends 30 days at first, and then 10 more days, right? And at the end of those 40 days that he spends up there, he's given the Torah. That's what's called the Torah in the Quran. Those actual tablets, apparently they're written on stone. Those actual tablets were passed down generation after generation amongst the Jews in the Bani Israel. The prophets would have them, would teach them. The people would carry them in a tabut, in some sort of a box or a chest. And I think in the Ark of the Covenant is famous because of Indiana Jones, but there's a real there's reality to that as well. Dave Hollywood kind of made it into a story, but there was actually such an ark, and it's mentioned in the Quran. It's some sort of a box, a chest, which contained these tablets. So this was passed down generation after generation, but in the I believe it was like 500s BC, in 586, Nebuchadnezzar, a Babylonian king, he comes in and he destroys Jerusalem. He destroys Jerusalem completely, flattens it. Nothing was left, including the tabut with the Torah in it. And he destroys their book. So in 586 BC, everything's gone. And he imprisons all the Bani Israel in the Babylonian captivity. He takes them to Babylon and imprisons them there and makes them into slaves. It's not until almost about 80 years later, in 457, Cyrus, the Persian king, defeats the Babylonians. And when he does this, he gives authority to one of the Jews named Ezra. And there's a book in the Old Testament called Ezra as well, Ezra. Right? So he makes Ezra his governor in Jerusalem, and Ezra he then undertakes the rebuilding, the rewriting of the Torah. Sorry?
His name is Uzair in the book.
It's not the same as Uzair. Ezra, I don't think it doesn't match up with Uzair because he's not known as a prophet. In Mizan, he talks about this in detail, and he says that Ezra, we don't know anything about him, other than what's mentioned in the Old Testament. We don't know whether he was reliable, how he knew what was in the Torah that now he wants to rewrite it, where he got the information for writing it. But in any case, there's this hole in history, in Jewish history, and there's no kind of direct link and direct chain between the Torah of Moses and the Old Testament that we now have, or the Hebrew Bible, right? So that's some background knowledge to know that we shouldn't equate them always. There is some truth left in the Torah that existed at the time of the prophet, and probably even today, right? There are true statements, true stories, true parts of stories there, right? But there's no. We should never say that this is the Torah that was revealed to Moses. If it was, then this would be an outstanding book. Everything should corroborate. There should be no contradiction between the Torah and the Quran, except in legal matters. But there are contradictions of fact, right? The Old Testament attributes sins, like drunkardness to prophets, like just lying, cheating, like all sorts of different things to the prophets. The prophets were. It says that they were like this. So absolutely, we know that they were not. They were infallible. They were all outstanding people. Right, so the Old Testament that now exists is not the same as the Torah. There is some overlap, and for that reason we still consider them Ahlul Kitab. We respect them to an extent because they still have some revelation left in their books. The same is true for the Bible, the Injil. When the Quran mentions Injil, right, we shouldn't necessarily immediately say, oh, that's the Bible, that's the New Testament. Right? The Quran talks about one Injil, one book that was revealed to Isa alayhi salam. Right? Whereas the New Testament consists of many different books, Right? There are four Gospels, and those are clearly, undisputedly written by people, by regular people, not by Jesus himself. They're not the actual book that was sent down to him. They're written by disciples, or sometimes later on, like disciples of disciples, right? Christians believe that they were written by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. And so somehow they were inspired by some sort of ilham, and based on that they wrote the same Bible that was revealed, or something like that. But there's no reason to say they're one, that the Injil of the Quran is the same as the New Testament of the Christians. And that's the Gospel, the four Gospels in the beginning. After the Gospels, then you have all these letters, mostly of Paul. Right? Those are definitely written by Paul himself, who never saw Jesus at all. He's kind of a parallel character to Abu Huraira in our tradition. Somebody who was associated with the enemy, who actually was an enemy of Jesus. Later on had this conversion and became like one of the major proponents of Christianity, despite the fact that he had no credentials whatsoever. So a lot of the corruption that's happened with Isa Islam's teachings is because of Paul, the same way Abu Huraira has been responsible with Muawiyah and then other people responsible for the corruption that's happened in Islam. And we have all these Sunnis who think that they know what the Prophet did and said. Recite the salawat, please. And then finally they say, again, this is the end of the bishara, the good news that the angels are bringing to Maryam. وَرَسُولًا إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل. They promise her that he's going to be a messenger to the children of Israel. That's in 349. The verse continues, but I ended it there because that's the end of this good news. This is maybe we'll look at this later, but there's a difference in the Quran between a Rasul and a Nabi. Here it says he's a messenger to the Bani Israel. In a nutshell, it's kind of a complicated discussion, but what Allah has come up with is this, and looking at the usage of the two words in the Quran. The word Nabi is used for somebody who is sent as a teacher of the religion to people. Okay, somebody who has news. Naba is news. Somebody who's given this news to then go and deliver to people. Right, so the prophethood of somebody is a very general sort of a position, a general sort of a responsibility that he has. Right? If Musa, for instance, is sent as a Nabi, as a prophet, he's sent for all people. Okay? A Rasul, on the other hand, is somebody who is in addition to being a prophet and having that general responsibility of teaching the religion, he also is given a particular risala, a particular message for a particular person or people. And he mentions that the way Rasul is used, it's a message that's kind of the last straw. When a Rasul is sent to somebody, that's an indication that this person is at the end of his line. This is his last chance. If he accepts the message and receives guidance, then he's okay. And if he doesn't, then he's going to be destroyed. Either destroyed completely, like Pharaoh and like people of Lot and Salih and so forth, or like the Jews of today, when Isa a.s. was sent as a Rasul to them, they rejected his call, and since then they've been, all the favor of God has been repealed from them, no longer a prophet sent to them, and all the favor that he has shown them, the blessings he has shown them throughout history have been repealed. Now they're on their own. He's washed his hands of them. Right? So that's the sense, that's the way that Rasul is used. So for instance, Musa a.s., he's a prophet to everyone. He's one of the Ulul Azm. He's a prophet to all people, not just to the Jews. So he comes, and whoever believes his message, they're welcome. He goes to Pharaoh, he invites him. Pharaoh's not a Bani Israel. He goes to even the magicians, the Egyptian magicians who were pagan, who were from Nabatean or whatever, the African.